Order, order. Can I welcome the Minister to this one-off session that we're holding on violence against women and girls. We were delighted to get the strategy finally, and look forward to having a time to ask some questions about it, which we've been including within all of our inquiries. We put violence against women and girls questions in there, so it's something that's underlying everything we do. Perhaps the panel would like to introduce themselves, starting with the Minister.
So I'm Jess Phillips and I'm the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls.
Hi, I'm Gisela Carr and I'm the Deputy Director for the Interpersonal Abuse Unit at the Home Office.
I'm Luke Hughes, I'm the Deputy Director of the Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation Response Unit in the Home Office.
Now, if the committee will indulge me, I'd just like to thank the Minister on behalf of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking for a response that you've sent to our letter. However, you may want to check your addresses because it was addressed to the Baroness Brady and not Karen Bradley.
I have to say, funnily enough, when going through my correspondence in the car on the way down and signed it off, I thought, has Karen Brady taken over? I did think. And then when I saw it was your name at the end, I just thought, I must have read it wrong at the beginning, so I shall apologise for that.
I wish I had £1 for every time we've been mixed up, but maybe in this case £10 is more appropriate. Anyway, let's move on to questions. Let's start with Jo White.
Can I thank you and welcome to our committee. Can I just ask you what lessons have been learned from previous Home Office violence against women strategies?
Yeah, so, obviously I was not responsible for previous strategies, and actually, more broadly, strategies in the past, and certainly ones that I have worked under as both a frontline worker and also as an opposition politician campaigning in this space, were much more focused on domestic abuse initially, and then moving into the space of violence against women and girls. I would say that not just from looking at other strategies, but looking at other critiques of the strategies, whether that's by the National Audit Office or in fact your own committee and other committees, the real need to have a very, very thorough prevention focus, I would say, is something that I was very, very keen to try and get right in this strategy. And also, there's been plenty of criticisms, and I've laid it myself, around the need for it to be truly cross-government, and that to actually mean something, rather than just like we had a meeting, wrote a strategy, and 3 different ministers signed the front page. And you know, I obviously don't have. There's been some very good ministers. I would say this in this instance. There has been some very, very, very good ministers who have had the job that
Baroness Brady included.
Karen Brady, she was excellent. As somebody who comes from an area where Birmingham City Football Club is, I feel I do have to say that she was excellent there. The real need for a cultural shift was the thing that I wanted the strategy to be different. And a cultural shift in society is really, really important, but it's very hard for us to ask for that when I didn't feel there was the right culture within just government departments even. So really making it so some of the absolutely key pillars of the strategy were not my responsibility, and I very much hope that the Health and Social Care Select Committee is scrutinising it. I very much hope that the Department for the Education is also scrutinising the violence against women and girls strategy, because the point was other government departments both putting their hands in their pockets and truly taking responsibility for some of the actions. And that, I think, that comes from various reports of select committees, but also the NAO made that very clear.
What challenges have changed since the publication of the last strategies?
Repeat that.
What challenges have changed since the publication of the previous strategies?
A number of... The first thing I'll say is that the strategy was published in December, so what is it now? So we're 4 months into the strategy publication, which has 259 commitments in it. We have a really specific cross-government focus on a priority of 15 of those. That's not to say that others shouldn't be, that others are cast by the wayside. They are the expectations of the government departments responsible for them to be cracking on with them, and we monitor that. But of the 15 that we are really, really focusing on as a cross-government, for example, I mean, it was only last week, and I hope all of you as members of Parliament will have received this and will be actioning it, because we want members of Parliament to be involved in this. You will have received information about how the ICBs in our country, the Integrated Care Boards, that the Department of Health is asking for expressions of interest for the new Steps to Safety scheme, which will be run by the Department of Health and Social Care and funded by them to fund in not just training of GPs, but also fund the support that then GPs can refer into for victims of domestic abuse. So that is a direct and tangible change of both, like a thing that will happen on the ground, where ICBs weren't as standard being asked to do anything on domestic abuse, actually, or sexual violence more broadly. So that's a cultural change that has happened within a department, and also then, because fundamentally, I keep a woman called Brenda who works in Asda in my head. Yeah. Will it affect Brenda who works in Asda in my constituency? And that will make a tangible change to people on the ground. But there is a number of other parts of the strategy that are very much in the process of rolling out, and people. So there have been 1,000 domestic abuse protection orders, for example, that have been taken up in the pilot areas. But the cultural change, I have to say that the work done by the Department of Health and Social Care feels like a real sea change in culture.
So the previous strategies, obviously there's been evaluation of how they're successful and not successful. How has that impacted on the development of the current strategy?
Well, look, we take the criticisms that have been laid at other strategies on board, and suggestions made by. We also live in an environment of not just select committees, but also, for example, the Angelini inquiry, the ICSA inquiry, and making sure that we are looking at what has been suggested. I personally get very, very sick of people saying lessons will be learned, and then we just say it again in 5 months' time. It's quite annoying. So look, we take on board, in building the strategy, we took on board not just all of those things, but also there was a huge amount of engagement both with victims themselves, with the sector, with other countries, as well as academics who have undertaken the most research into the different sorts of violence against women and girls across our country. So a huge amount of learning and an exercise in what was needed went into the analysis that built the strategy.
And just to reassure you, I've convened meetings of relevant select committees to make sure that we're all considering violence against women and girls, and it's on everyone's agenda. Yeah. So I hope that they are looking at it. As I say, we've made it an underpinning item across everything we're doing. What
I would say in response to that is that I hope it's their ministers that also get scrutinised for it, because that it's always helpful to. It's very easy to become the face of a thing. And then the expectation, and I'm sure you will have felt this at your time at the Home Office, that's the Home Office's responsibility. The whole point is that the violence against women and girls is saying, no, it's everybody's responsibility. So I look forward to their ministers being scrutinised as well.
Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for visiting us. I'm going to ask you about governance. Before I do, I want to ask a really basic question. Where are we on a definition of VAWG? I know there's one in the strategy, but where are we in accepting that across the sector, police forces? All the evidence we've heard in the past is there is no agreed definition.
That was one of the specific criticisms that has been made, that has been worked on, and I'll hand over to Gisela, who actually did some of the specific work with regard to the fundamental difference was the definition that the government was working to and that used by police forces, which is quite a fundamental fissure. And so I shall hand over to Gisela to explain that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think there was something in the report from this committee, and it's also a finding from the NAO as well around different definitions of VAWG. So as you've said, we've very clearly set out the government definition in the VAWG strategy, and we've been taking forward work with policing to better align the definition that policing use. We've done that through the new National Centre for VAWG and Public Protection, and we have now got an agreed definition around the Home Office list of core offences, which we'll be taking forward with policing. We've already done an initial first data share as well with policing to enable that joint working, so we're all now working from a common definition and a common data set that we all understand. And I think that is something that we're really pleased about, because we know that's been rightly identified as an issue in the past, and it's really important that we and our really key delivery partners are all working from a shared understanding of the issue.
And the threat assessment that is done by the NCVPP, I always used to criticise Theresa May's naming of the HMR, FRSCS or whatever the millions of letters are, and then I did the same thing and gave something a silly name. But that they undertake an annual threat assessment like you might do with terrorism in this space, and we were previously not working to the same data set, and now we will be.
Ms. Carr, you talk about the police as if it's one body. The evidence we heard was different police forces have different definitions. Have they sorted that out?
Yeah, so as the Minister said, through the new National Centre, they are working to standardise that across 43 forces. So we've agreed that list of core offences, which aligns with our definition as well. And then now the next step will be for them to formally communicate that out to forces and use that to inform their next strategic threat and risk assessment, which is coming in the summer.
Do we have a time frame for that?
So it will inform the overarching risk assessment that comes in the summer, but I wouldn't want to get into any more detail because obviously that is a matter for policing.
It's an evergreen issue that there are 43 different police forces and very little power to tell them exactly what they have to do on certain things, and that's why we set up the National Centre really specifically, because I don't think that what the West Midlands Police on terrorism, for example, does is wildly different. It almost certainly works to the exact same set of standards as Avon and Somerset Police Force might, and that is not the case in violence against women and girls. So the whole point of creating a policing centre was to try and get the standardisation across the board.
And you're confident at the moment that looks like it's working, as far as you can tell?
Early days.
I think it's early days. This is obviously it's really good progress for us that we've been able to agree on a kind of a core definition. And as I said, we have done that first data share from the Home Office to facilitate that happening. As the Minister has said, like it's the first time we've done this, and we need to kind of learn from it and refine it. But I think we're feeling very positive about the progress that we've been able to make in this area.
Thank you. Now, on to governance. There's a VAWG board, there's a Safer Streets Mission board, there's a Safer Streets Delivery board, there's a VAWG Strategy Advisory board. I'm resisting the temptation to ask whether you are bored, but how do they all work together?
Look, the way in which that the violence against women and girls strategy is governed is I would say the main board that you identify is that of the Interministerial Violence Against Women and Girls group.
Board.
That's the VAWG board,
okay.
Yeah. I'm never bored on that, actually. I like to give out gold stars and whatever the opposite of gold stars is. And that is has representation from 14 different government departments, including those in the devolved administrations as well. And that is where we track the progress of the violence against women and girls strategy and where we are on the progress of that. We also so that is the main functioning board. That is the fundamental. There is also the VSAB, which is the sector body where we gain advice from sector specialists and other specialists in the field. So the police sit on that board, and also the LGA, for example, for local authorities. And those two bodies are where it is advised and governed from. We also feed to number 10, into number 10, monthly progress on the actions. Both us and other government departments have to feed monthly to number 10 on the actions of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and they take what can only be described as an eagle-eyed and very, very keen interest in it.
And the Safer Streets Delivery Board, where is that?
Yeah, go on.
So that is the kind of senior officials group that we use to coordinate our work across government. So obviously VAWG is one part of the Safer Streets mission. That is at Director General or Director level representation.
That's the mission board, isn't it?
No, that's the delivery board. So the delivery board is the officials board for Safer Streets, and that's Director Generals and directors from interested departments.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The mission board is the ministerial equivalent.
Sorry, that's right, sorry. And the Safer Streets Delivery Board, that still exists, does it? Because we've got a parliamentary answer in March saying it's ceased to meet since November.
The delivery board meets monthly, so I was at the last meeting of it last week. So that the delivery board is absolutely meeting on a monthly basis. I think the mission board might be the ministerial one.
Delivery board. And the Safer Streets Mission Board, has that stopped working?
So that's
the one I meant, sorry,
so,
that's it. It stopped in November.
So my understanding is that that board has always met on an ad hoc basis as and when it's been kind of deemed necessary to get ministers together to escalate or to kind of resolve any issues. Obviously for VAWG we have that regular monthly governance at officials level, and we have the interministerial group on VAWG, which has up until this point been everything we need in terms of resolving issues across departments.
Mm-hmm. I also just have to, their phone numbers.
Okay, because we were looking at an answer from the Advocate General for Scotland and answering a question in the House of Lords on VAWG strategy, and she said in February of this year that the VAWG board reports directly to the Safer Streets Mission Board, but you're saying that's not what happens.
I mean, look, when the Safer Streets Mission Board chooses that it is focusing on VAWG, the VAWG has absolutely been discussed at the Safer Streets Mission Board.
It's not a formal
I have attended one where that was the case. But the overarching mission of the Home Office, the Safer Streets mission, VAWG is only one part of it.
No, I see that. So, but you're telling me that what the VAWG board always does is it does report to number 10. That's where it's reporting. Mm-hmm. That's its firm reporting line. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And the other we report to number 10. And I mean, the Prime Minister takes a very keen interest in it. He has held a series of cabinet level meetings, of which there is one this week, where he gets the relevant cabinet secretaries from different government departments and talks to them about progress against the strategy.
Your reporting to the Home Office is on an ad hoc basis with the Mission Board. Is there any other ways you report into the Home Office?
I am the Home Office.
I know, you are part of the Home Office.
I mean, not the whole of it.
No, indeed.
Yeah. I'd like to stress that I'm not the whole of it.
Maybe later.
But, I mean, the progress that is undertaken from the Home Office's perspective of what our deliverables are within the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, that is entirely monitored through my ministerial post. It's and all of the ordinary systems where, I mean, I meet with the Home Secretary every single week and discuss it with her.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Peter Prinsley wants to come in quickly.
I just wanted to come in quickly. So, we've been talking about a definition of violence against women and girls. Now, there is a clear definition of rape, and there must be figures on the number of reported rapes. And we know that many rapes are not reported. Mm-hmm. Probably most rapes are not reported.
That's correct.
So, in this mission that we have to halve violence against women and girls, let's just talk about, say, rape. Do you think it's realistic to halve the incidence of rape?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, otherwise we wouldn't have set out to do it. But you won't halve the incidences of rape unless you work very, very closely on the prevention of rape.
Right.
And what makes The fundamental is what makes men rape.
Right. So if, say, at the beginning of a parliament we had the figures on the number of rapes that were reported each year, do you think that a measure of success would be, at the end of a parliament, the number of reported rapes had halved?
No, it would have doubled. The number of reported rapes would have doubled. The number of rapes would have halved. And that is why the basis for the metric that we are measuring is not based on reported crime figures, because in violence against women and girls, reported crime figures are, whilst an important measure, I was about to say completely useless, they are of course an important measure, but they do not represent, I mean, most women who, and I include, in fact I'm going to say all women who have suffered this, and that is most women, have not reported the incidences that occurred to them. So you have to do it on the basis of the crime survey.
Thank you.
Ms. Murray.
Thank you for coming in, Minister and officials. I want to, you said at the beginning about how some of this is the responsibility of the Home Office, but a lot of it is cross-government and a lot of other departments are key stakeholders in you achieving this. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you monitor what other government departments do, influence them to do more, understand the effectiveness of what you've asked them to do?
Yes, so obviously the interministerial group that we agreed as that group to focus on the 15 most cross-government and manifesto commitments that are within the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and we work as that group on the progress of those, and different government departments are expected and do bring to that group, and prior to that group their progress charts. So there is literally, like a Gantt chart or whatever they're called, there is a progress chart that so that we can address whether we're falling off the edge, running ahead of schedule. If only that was always the case on all of them. And that is monitored through that group. And like I say, I was sort of glibly saying I give out gold stars on the alternative. That is absolutely the case. People are held accountable. And where there is, where I really feel as if, I don't know how to say this other than saying people's feet aren't pulling their finger out. The system where either myself or the Home Secretary then have bilaterals with those ministers, but actually what the system has been to date in order to get the strategy to where it is the intervention of the Prime Minister.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I suppose that was a good description of the process you follow. Now I want to ask for your analysis of how it's actually working. And I'm not asking you to tell tales on ministerial colleagues, but it is important. It is important for us as Parliament to understand what bits of the system are clunkier in this field, so we can push on them. So what parts of the system have you found in your 2 years in this role are harder to make work on VAWG, and what parts are getting it and moving ahead?
I mean, a bit like undertaking a risk assessment, I would say that risk is dynamic and changing. So I would have sat before you, and I almost certainly did, and had a relatively dim view, for example, of the Department for Health and their willingness of a cultural change to understand that violence against women and girls makes both the perpetrators and the victims of it very, very sick. I felt that the little progress was, and I found that to be clunky in the beginning, and now I couldn't praise them enough for the progress that they have made. And so I suppose that is the system working. There are government departments who I thought would be more difficult than they have been. I have to say the Ministry of Defence, I'm going to give them a gold star. Can't say I thought that I'd be working with the Ministry of Defence as much as I have been. But look, things in governments are difficult and slow in lots of cases. There's many select committees saying the same thing today. But I have to say that, I mean, look, there are competing interests always as well in what you are trying to do and fighting for prioritisation, especially in a time of war. But I have to say I do not feel that there is a shortage of where I am concerned that things are slow in a government department, that I don't have the resource and recourse to try and unblock that. I do feel like I do. Look, there is a tension always between the growth element of, for example, online and the need to make an online space safe. That tension has existed for the entire time for any of us who were there. We're doing the online safety bill, which felt like a decade. It was a decade, in fact. And so you do have to compete with other issues within this space. But like, I have to say, I don't think I have found it particularly hard to push through.
Just kind of check that I'm understanding what you're saying there. So are you saying that the competing demands, especially around the online challenges that we face and, you know, all the social media discussions that we have in Parliament all the time, are you finding that that's taking up a lot of bandwidth to prosecute through other parts of the VAWG strategy? Am I right in understanding
No,
that?
I wouldn't say there's any one. Look, each government department has takes its own responsibility for its own things and takes up as much bandwidth as it needs. I have to say that my job and that of Minister Alex Davies-Jones as well in the Ministry of Justice becomes very much like we are getting up in everybody's business in their government departments, and that can take a varying amount of bandwidth because me and Alex both also have quite important parts of the strategy to deliver from our own government departments. And that is why I talk about the cultural change and I am starting to see that I need to get up in people's business less than I did certainly in the building of the strategy.
Can I ask, how often does the IMG meet?
It's bi-monthly, so every other month we
You're
meet.
reporting monthly?
Monthly to number 10.
And
Yeah.
do ministers always attend?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. There's, I mean, obviously sometimes, but no, we don't have particular trouble with the attendance of ministers from.
The same minister comes each time?
Pretty much. I mean, in some of the cases where it's Lords ministers, because like that, they are constantly having to rerun everything that we do in here, and there's only one of them. Sometimes, but they will always send a Commons minister. But I have to say, in that, attendance hasn't been an issue.
How many departments have a ministerial lead that's a Lords minister?
2. So DWP and the Department of Health.
Thank you. Paul Kohler.
Well, that was going to be my question, actually. So excellent. So these 14 departments, they're all coming along.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
People are often quite other government departments are often keen to come along, and I'm like, I'm not sure that what you're going to bring to the party, but I'm trying to come up with a way to make solar energy about violence against women and girls. So if anyone's got one, happy to hear it.
You'll be aware of the letter.
What?
Eagers.
Yeah.
You'll be aware of the letter sent to you and Alex by the chairs of the Home Affairs, Women's Equalities and Justice about stakeholders feeling they were left out of the process. What have you done since the strategy was published to address that feeling that some of them felt left out?
Look, I mean, I can only apologise if people feel left out. We undertook, a huge series of, I think it was 12 roundtables in the build-up to the strategy that I think like 100 different organisations.
I know what you did. I've got it all here.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting you did.
I'm glad that what I just said was what you had written down.
They felt left out. They felt left out. What have you done to try and build some more confidence in what?
Well, look. So we have I mean, I have a series of meetings that I have undertaken, not just with, because often here in London, here in Westminster, the people you are seeing is the people who are from a national organisation that umbrella represents. And I know, as somebody who was a federated member of Women's Aid, that it wasn't me who often went to, although sometimes it was, their Home Office meetings. It was the head of the national organisation, and so what I have sought to do with all of those umbrella bodies is to hold meetings with their CEOs of their members in the field, which I've done with Rape Crisis, Women's Aid and IMCAN, who are the umbrella bodies who sit on the Violence Against Women sector board that we hold, and look, we have sought to ensure that people feel part of it. And I have to say we had a very, very good meeting, was it last week? The week spurred into one where we have started to properly focus now on the delivery of the strategy. And we had a deep dive session on the Department of Health proposals with both ministers and advisors. I have to doff my cap to Jess Phillips, who has been taken on as a health advisor in VAWG by that department, so that the sector could sit and talk to her and to make sure that in that deep dive about health, it wasn't just the static members of the board. We have rotating seats on the board, so that the organisations that are specifically about health and working in that environment were invited along as well.
Carr, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yep, I can give a bit more detail. So look, I think we've very much understood some of the concerns that have been raised in letters from yourselves and also obviously directly with us with the stakeholder engagement, with the stakeholder organisations with whom we work. And we've done some tangible things to just respond to that feedback, including transparency around some of the discussions in the stakeholder advisory board and making that accessible for membership organisations in particular. I think the one thing I probably would just stress is that if we really want this to be an advisory board, and as the ministers just talked about, we had our kind of first deep dive session with this group last week on a specific area of the strategy, and to be able to do that we do kind of need to keep the meeting a manageable size, so we are constantly trying to kind of balance that representation and, as the minister said, bringing in specialist organisations, but also making sure that ourselves and the other departments who are kind of represented and presenting get the benefit of that expert discussion and really a deep and rich discussion. I would just highlight, obviously this is only one way with which we engage with experts across the VAWG sector. I also chair a quarterly stakeholder group which is about 40 to 50 organisations, including at practitioner level from across England and Wales. Our team will work very closely on specific issues, so for example with the buy and for sector on migrant victims, for example, so we have strong relationships directly with organisations. And then I think one of the things we have done for a while in the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice as well, but which we are excited to see other departments doing as well, is direct stakeholder engagement and consultation on the commitments in the VAWG strategy that they are rolling out. So actually I think it's a really good thing. Obviously we will continue to strengthen and expand where we can what we do from the Home Office, but actually we've done some work to kind of coordinate the other ways that the sector can engage directly with those departments who are delivering bits of the strategy, and actually for us that feels like a really good thing, because we want those departments to have the benefit of working with those experts. Exactly, and we don't want to
so
go
MHCLG has a specific housing related and they also deal with local commissioning, the vast majority of it being through local councils. The Ministry of Justice, as Gisela has said, also has a stakeholder board, but I attended one at DSIT recently with the Violence Against Women and Girls sector on their sections of the VAWG strategy, and obviously in the building of the proposals by the Department for Health, that they were heavily involved and engaged with that throughout. So it is good that other departments are doing it now as well.
And you feel confident the sector is feeling more involved in the process? That's your feeling?
I'm not here anymore to speak for them. I used to be one of them. Relations between myself and most of the sector are lifelong, so I speak to. I spoke to the head of Women's Aid this morning. I don't feel that there is any particular animosity between us.
I don't think there's animosity, no. Feeling of being, but you think things are improving from when
I would
we
say
wrote
so.
to you.
I would say so.
Okay. And now the response to the strategy has been good. One of the criticisms is there's not enough focus on prevention. And can I read something that I received from a constituent of mine who I've been working with for the last 2 years, was the subject of a terrible sexual assault. And she wrote this, she said, "I recently attended a speed awareness course. One thing that really struck me is how much the police care about the effects of speeding and how there are far fewer accidents because of their strategy, which is improved education, consistent strategy, and a meaningful consequences for offenders. From a survivor's perspective, I consider the following needs to happen. Education needs to start at primary school, be focused, age-appropriate and perpetrator-based. The law needs to be consistently applied, and minor offences need to be taken more seriously." I'd like to hear your response to my constituents on that.
I would say
point.
that everything that she has said is exactly right, and every single suggestion that she makes is in the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. Because I mean, I sort of would joke that putting Part 4 of the Domestic Abuse Act made women's safety and refuge matter as much as bins. I think it's a completely fair criticism to suggest that the laws and the resource that over generations has gone into cars or parking. We have people stopping people from parking in the wrong place in a city centre. There's no same ticketing system, is there, if somebody's awful to me in the city centre? Our desire to protect from cars has outstripped our attention on the violence that women and girls suffer for many, many, many generations. So she's absolutely right. I mean, on prevention, on the point on prevention and the point about having to go on a course, if you will, although I wonder how many people go on that course more than once, is that is exactly right. We have to make sure that there is change programmes as well as she has identified, evenly distributed and properly distributed justice, but also change elements, and that is why a huge part of the strategy is rolling out perpetrator programs at varying risk levels. Standard and medium risk is to talk in the sort of old terminology of the risk assessment, and high risk, which for the first time the strategy commits to rolling out entirely across the country. And so, but the education piece of work is an absolutely fundamental thing. And if I look at the data around the falling age of perpetration of child abuse and other VAWG crimes, the idea that we can tackle this and prevent it from getting worse in the future without looking at interventions in education is for the birds. But there has been very little research and evidence built up over the years about what works in that space, and so we're going to have to invent it.
Yeah, and my last question...
She's right though. Tell her she's bang on.
I will indeed, thank you. And my last question is, there's some doubt over the funding and lack of clarity over whether it's new funding or existing funding. Are you clear about the funding you've got for VAWG?
Well, I am clear about the funding that I've got for VAWG.
You are?
I'm clear about the funding within the Home
always
Office. Although when you say VAWG, even within the Home Office, actually Gisela's budget is the classic thing that we would describe as being the VAWG budget. Luke's, we wouldn't describe it as being the VAWG budget, or Christian's, or in fact the modern slavery team, yet of course they are all part of the action on VAWG. What I would say is that so some of the money is new, some of it is money that had been allocated before. In most of those cases it has been uplifted. So if I think of the MHCLG Part 4 of the Domestic Abuse Act funding specifically for accommodation-based services, when we came into government, we increased that by £30 million a year, and that will be maintained over the next 3 years as well. So that is part not new funding, part new funding, and within other government departments. So, for example, one of the things, the steps to safety, which I've already spoken about, entirely new funding going to domestic abuse services within the field, or the Child House model of sexual violence counselling for children, entirely new money coming from the Department of Health. And so, yes, it's a mixture of both is the actual truth. It's never ever going to be enough though, is it? Like, that's the truth. The fundamental is you won't, from any government department, no minister's ever going to sit in front of you and go, nailed it, got exactly what I wanted, ever.
Miss Carr's about to give me some figures, I think, are you?
You go ahead.
I wonder if the best way, if there's anything specific I can get into more detail on, I'm really happy to.
Well, if we could just have, not now, but if the committee could have what is new funding and actual some figures, that would be useful. If you're saying there is new figures.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I think it would just be helpful just to understand, because new funding, obviously, in some areas is where we've kind of, are you looking for the uplifts and for programmes that existed already, or completely new budget lines? Because I would say it's just a combination of the two.
What we would like is how much more money is being put into this issue across, whether it's uplifts or new.
Okay.
We've got some questions from Ben Maguire that's about funding for victim and survivor services, so that might help to lead. But yeah, I think we'd be interested in new services. So Ben Maguire.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for coming in today. I was wondering if you could give us a bit of an outline about money spent on support services for victim and survivors as part of this strategy, and then I've just got one more follow-up on that as well.
So, I mean, there is two big headlines, I would say, in victim support funding, and then there is almost certainly within different government departments other victim support funding. So there isn't just like one government pot for victim support where everybody gets to apply for the thing that they want for victim support out of. So the two big headlines would be the 550 million, which is from the Department of Justice, that is devolved down through police and crime commissioners, some of it really specifically on sexual violence and domestic abuse, and some of it part of the broader victim support funding. There is also I think it's 480 million, is it? Or 499 million, is it? That is from MHCLG with regard to, is it 499, yeah. I mean, really, they could have just given the extra one, couldn't they? But the 499 million that comes from MHCLG that is really specifically to fund domestic abuse-related accommodation-based services as part of Part 4 of the Domestic Abuse Act. So those are the two sort of big pots that are specifically for victim support. But obviously, so for example, the funding that even the Home Office is putting into perpetrator programmes, for example, the commissioning of that has to fund victim support services as part of it. There will be £50 million that is going in from the Department of Health specifically to build the Child House model of child sexual abuse counselling and support for child victims of sexual abuse. There are a number of other pots that exist here and there for so all the helpline, I think it's 18.6 million comes from the Home Office pot. Into both advocacy and helpline support for victims. So there are a number of different pots. There isn't just like we're going to give like £1 billion to victim support, although it all adds up to more than £1 billion.
Great, thanks. That all sounds really good, and particularly the helpline that you mentioned. But having met with various stakeholder groups, bar councils, surviving economic abuse, lawyers who care, and many more, one of the persisting concerns that they all have is the passing reference in the strategy to legal aid. And I've mentioned this to the Minister before, and I know you said earlier today that you'd give the MOJ a gold star, and you've mentioned the 550 million that they've given, so that's obviously really positive.
I think I gave the Department of Health a gold star.
You what, sorry?
MOD I gave a gold star.
Oh, I thought you said the Ministry of Justice.
No, the Ministry of Defence.
Okay, so they don't get a gold star.
No, they can have one. They do a lot of work. I don't. They're not in the giving out area. They sit alongside me. They do the giving out.
Right. And I guess what lots of those groups have raised with me is that's a vital support service for victims and survivors of domestic violence and domestic abuse. So,
of course, yeah, legal aid.
What is the government doing to address that? Because obviously,
which specific thing? Because obviously, in most cases, certainly that I handle personally, So, for example, the need for legal aid for assistance within the family court. Victims of domestic abuse are entitled to legal aid because of their status as a victim of domestic abuse, and even the means test. There is quite a lot of case law. Certainly, I can think of as the specific example that whereby if you own a property and that can't be taken into account if it is part of a domestic abuse settlement, and for you to access legal aid. So, is there a specific area where they are missing legal aid? Divorce proceedings potentially.
On the point that you've raised there, Minister, it's actually up to 100,000. So for lots of domestic abuse victims, if they've got property of more than 100,000, that
there is case precedent where that isn't taken into account. There was a case that was fought. I can't remember the name of the case, but there is a case. Moving away from that
specifically, though, I'm just quite interested to know what your department, and as you said before, cross department across the government, what you're doing to make sure there is legal aid provision for those survivors, leaving those specific cases.
Well, look, I am not from the department that deals
cross-departmental, though, going back to
it is absolutely
mantra.
Cross-departmental, and ensuring that people can access support is absolutely part of the strategy. But I am, as I said to you in the debate, I am not in the weeds. I am not in the weeds of what they're doing about GPs either. I am not in the weeds of what the Ministry of Justice are specifically doing on those particular areas of work. But I have to say that during the round tables and what built the strategy, it was not an issue that came up.
Would it be helpful maybe if I got those groups together and wrote to you?
But, I mean, obviously we
issues?
work with surviving economic abuse all the time, and in fact the Home Office funds surviving economic abuse to do their work.
You'd be open to hearing their suggestions on that?
Of course, I speak to
Excellent.
Sam on a regular basis. She was on the VSAB, not the last one, the one before, yeah?
Brilliant.
Yep.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you. Hi, Minister. Could I just ask a little bit more about the way that victims funding will be directed in the future in the context of police accountability reform? I know you mentioned about police and crime commissioners being receiving some of that funds at the moment, and whatever the rights and wrongs of police reform in terms of police force accountability, I think I've heard from some that remember the instigation of PCCs that recognise that in some cases, the introduction of those roles allowed more direct engagement with victims locally in a way that was more responsive and understanding than previous structures. So I just wonder, in the context of the abolition of PCCs in 2028, what is your view about the way that funding for victims might be directed in the future, and how will you be feeding that?
My view is currently being built by, along with sector colleagues. So myself and the Policing Minister last week held the first meeting as part of the police reform programme with the violence against women and girls sector to talk specifically about both what works in the current system, and you're quite right. I would argue, as somebody who's been commissioned by these services, that the police and crime commissioners were not bad, but that is only because the bar was quite low. And certainly that they had a convening power that definitely should not be lost in any new system that was brought about, and an accountability as well, I think, came up very clearly in those conversations about what was good, what was bad, what they would want to see, and actually how can we improve the commissioning system. So part of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy commits us, and it very much follows up on the work that your committee did with regard to commissioning, about how well, frankly, woeful and difficult and hampering the commissioning environment is across the board. And so we have committed to a sort of cross-government process of looking at commissioning and how that is done, and a standard set from the centre that will be part of the strategy's works. But we did specifically meet with them to talk about that, their fears about the transition, what could be improved. So look, it's not that there is a review being undertaken about what that will look like. I think that from what the Home Secretary has already said and the Policing Minister has already said, is that the commissioning function of whatever the new police force areas, and I don't wish to precede what that review finds, that commissioning function has to be maintained. Also, as this is running along track also of the duty to collaborate becoming a fundamental part of this system as it comes into law, exactly how different commissioners in local areas, so that convening issue, there is quite a lot of work from myself, the Ministry of Justice, MHCLG and others to look at how the duty to collaborate will start to work in practice. But look, I think you're right. I think police and crime commissioners haven't done a bad job on that.
Thanks. We'll try and keep an eye on that, I think.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask about the National Centre for VAWG and Public Protection. And first of all, is it actually a place? Is it a centre?
Yeah, yes.
Where is it, and can you describe it?
You go for it.
It's got a building at the College of Policing in Wrighton.
Right. Okay.
In Wrighton. Yeah.
Wrighton.
Yeah, not Brighton. I just
Brighton.
she said it.
Sorry.
I just wanted to be clear. It's Wrighton, not Brighton.
Okay. How does this thing get funded, and has it got a long-term funding plan?
It's funded by us,
right.
So it is funded directly through the IAU budget within the Home Office, and it has the long-term funding for the current spending review period. Obviously, cannot commit to anything beyond that, or to even being here.
Okay. Could you just describe how this centre actually works to deliver the VAWG strategy? What does it do?
So the centre does its job is not to deliver the government's VAWG strategy. It is part of the government delivering the VAWG strategy, and it is headed up by Helen Millichamp. She was on the terrace at an event last night, and their job is to train, standardise, because as you have identified, there is 43 different forces with 43 different ideas about what they should be doing. It is to train and standardise practice with regards to violence against women and girls and public protection, so child abuse abuses as well. Do you want to go on?
Would it help if I give some specific examples of things they've done over the past year?
Perhaps also to tell us how you would measure how effective it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't I give some examples and then talk a bit about the governance and the scrutiny that we've got.
Thank you.
So obviously they're operationally independent, they're part of policing, and so they will do a mix of really kind of tactical delivery. So they've supported on the pilots that we have running for Reneem's Law, domestic abuse experts in 999 control rooms. They have supported the rollout of rapid video response to all forces, which can be a really powerful tool for the policing to use in DA cases in particular. And then they have done work to continue to embed the Operation Sateria principles into forces and to roll out the manifesto commitment on specialist rape and sexual abuse teams. So they can really do that kind of leadership and tactical work with forces. They also have a convening power, bringing together chief constables and chief officers to talk at a strategic level about how policing is improving their response to VAWG. And they also have regional practice teams who will go out into forces and really get into the detail of how well they are delivering against the kind of strategic ambition and objectives that we have set, and where actually they need greater support. And that, I think, is particularly that strategic leadership combined with them being able to go out into forces and give them really specialist advice is something that's really powerful from the centre. In terms of their objectives, so they are obviously operationally independent. The budget comes from us as the Home Office, and alongside that we set a series of strategic deliverables for the centre. So effectively that for the last year looked like us saying we would like you to have delivered X, Y and Z commitments across policing. That will be really tactical things like supporting the Reneem's Law delivery. It will be strategic things like building training pathways, and then that is reported to us. This is done through a grant to the College of Policing, so we have the mechanisms that we would have for any other grant from the Home Office in terms of quarterly reporting, annual reporting against progress against the deliverables of the grants, and so that kind of gives us assurance that the money that is going across is being spent in the areas that we would expect it to. And then at a strategic level, we have an officials regular delivery board where we will work with the senior leaders in the centre to understand what's working well, where they need support from us, what we could collectively be doing even better, and then they will periodically meet with the minister as well, and there we really look
Sometimes they need us to do something that they so for example they recently undertook a piece of work about the risk assessments, so DASH risk assessment versus Adara risk assessment used variously by different police forces. Police forces don't even all use the same risk assessment, they don't use the same follow-up risk assessment on cases of domestic abuse, and other partners use other ones. So we ask them to undertake a specific piece of work on the nature of risk assessment, and what they then will sometimes come back and say to us, for example, is we need a legislative change here, or we need this, and so there is a sort of symbiotic relationship.
The sense that I have is that a new organisation has been invented, which is very effective. And do you think the public know about this new organisation, which is so effective and is dealing with violence against women and girls, or is it something which has sort of disappeared into the miasma of government?
Do I think that the country knows? I mean, the people of Birmingham Yardley speak of little else than the College of Policing, or the Inspectorate. I'm not sure. Look, I agree with you. Actually, I think in the first phase, do I think that everybody knows that Scotland Yard is like the national policing on terrorism, for example, like that there is a different strata? Yes, I do. Maybe we need a rotating sign for people to stand outside of. But the very first and most important job we have to do, actually, with regard to embedding the centre, is make police forces know about it and respect it. And I emphasise the need for respect in that. The way that Matt Dukes would be considered as the sort of terrorism lead in policing, that Helen has the same status. So actually that is the job of work of that, because my frequent refrain is, I want what counter-terrorism's got. And so, I mean, I'm not there on the money, hope springs eternal. But that's the real issue. And yes, maybe the public, it's not necessarily something that the public is ever going to, like an individual going to ever interact with, though. They're going to continue to interact with their police force.
But when we say we've changed something, we really have changed something, haven't we? We've invented something new, and we need to tell people about it.
Yes. Okay, I shall get a loud hailer.
Can I just ask a small follow-up on the centre? How does it work with devolved administrations, and what's the relationship like with other parts of the UK?
I mean, obviously, because they have national, you will know, I don't need to tell you, the Police Scotland and the PSNI, obviously it covers England and Wales, the national centre, as sort of slightly odd system that we have in the UK. But obviously they work closely with counterparts and also work with them on the sort of standardising and learning as well. But if you, I mean, whether there's anything more formalised than that, I'm not sure.
I think not at this stage. I would say, obviously, for the first year, the centre has had quite a big job centralising programmes across England and Wales and really establishing itself. But I know they've had some initial contacts, certainly with PSNI. We can, I'm not sure yet about Police Scotland, but I know that is something that they're wanting to do in terms of sharing best practice. And obviously, in addition to that, we have supported things directly with other police services, so PSNI and Police Scotland on specific projects. So on depots, for example, I think the Met hosted PSNI to just talk to them about what the depot process looks like here as they think about whether that's something they want to adopt.
Right. I mean, obviously, policing is devolved, as you understand, but it's devolved, but it's not independent. And there's a lot of really good learning that can be spread between Scotland, England, and Northern Ireland. So I would encourage that.
I'm often surprised by the difference between the schemes that we have certainly in domestic abuse with regard to, so for example, only now domestic homicide reviews or their counterparts actually being used in Scotland. And so, there is often cross-learning. Also, Wales are undertaking a different scheme at the moment that they are piloting. So there is difference. I think that on the stuff that we think works well, we will absolutely work with them to make sure, because I don't think I'm just the Minister for England and Wales, if I'm honest.
How much is the annual funding for the centre?
13.
So it was 13 in the first year. I think it's 14.6 in the
that's
this coming
entirely Home
financial
Office
year.
funding?
Yes.
And there will be opportunities for legislative change if needed? If you said that they put forward proposals for legislative change.
Look, I'm always there's always legislative change that needs making, isn't there? I have to say, in this area, though, I think there's quite a lot of legislation on the books. I think it is making that legislation actually mean something, especially when I think about the parts of an action and inaction, both literally in legislative terms or in reality terms of the Domestic Abuse Act, for example, I'm not entirely sure that there is necessarily big legislative changes that are needed in this space. We just need the legislation to actually be used. I
would agree on the Modern Slavery Act as well, which
Agreed.
I keep reading cases that seem to me to be absolutely cut and dried, fitting within the offences sitting within that act, and it just wasn't used.
I find that to be an absolutely maddening truth. And part of, as we digress, but part of the action plan with regard to modern slavery is really a really specific focus, actually, on the policing and the criminal charging of it, because it's all those years it's still so woefully low when it seems like the bar must be there's a lot of work that needs doing on that.
We have got questions on human trafficking coming up, but yes, I think the point has been made that we would like to see the police using those offences a bit more, and the prosecutors.
Agreed.
We're going to go on to online, and Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you. Minister, the strategy recognises that VAWG is increasingly perpetrated online. So I wonder if you could maybe start off the section by just saying a little bit about your assessment about the online environment faced by women and girls in this country, and how you're measuring the instances and prevalence of different types of VAWG online.
Yes, so I mean, my own assessment is biased and clouded for obvious reasons. My own personal experience of an online environment not being safe for women is and forces women to opt out of that particular part of life, which is easy to say that you should just do that, but that is a fundamental part of life. I do not undertake any social media whatsoever in my life because it is too dangerous for me.
I gave it up when I was doing your job.
Yeah, I mean,
haven't gone back.
I
won't go back.
Yeah, no. Honestly, I just want to say for the record, my life is happier as a result of that. But so. Like recognising that enormous Pandora that is out of the box, what we have to do is really focus on the art of the possible. With regard to the Home Office and the crime types that, and certainly within the violence against women and girls strategy, there are broad commitments to work with DCIT, really specifically on the broader harms, and I myself and Liz Kendall met with the tech leads for many of the big online companies recently to push them on what they should be doing and what the government is going to expect and what the government will do if it doesn't get what it expects. But for me, from a Home Office specific perspective, I would say, and it is one of the 15 priority areas that have been identified for the IMG on VAWG, is that the issue of child sexual abuse online is, you can't come into the Home Office and do my job and unsee some of the things that I have seen, and I think that as and so, you know, raw data, there are the monitoring of child sexual abuse cases and online grooming cases would make your toes curl in both quantity and in content. And still, I think as a country, we have not, certainly as multi-agency partners, as somebody who has worked in this particular area of work for a long time, that like if a kid were to turn up tomorrow to a school and say, I have been raped by my uncle, like it might not be perfect, but there is a pathway that exists. If a kid turns up and says that another kid in her class has sent naked images, made her do sex acts online, or that in the worst cases I see some fella in Tennessee is making her do sex acts online for 8 Robux on Roblox, there is those same multi-agency pathways, whether it's in health, whether it's in children's social care, whether it's with the police. We are not at a level of seriousness of child sexual abuse online that we need to be. And so there's a huge amount of work that needs to be undertaken that I work very, very closely with Josh McAllister on with regards to that. But what needs to happen, and what the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy commits to, is that we will make it impossible, and I stress the term impossible, for children to take, receive and share naked images of themselves. Because if children couldn't take those images like I couldn't when I was a child, I would have had to take them to be developed or had a Polaroid and paid endless amounts of money for the film of that. I think I had a Polaroid camera and my mum bought me one set of film and that was the end of the Polaroid camera. The ability for children to take naked images of themselves has got to be stopped, and the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy commits to that.
Thank you. One of the other things that the plan involves is making the UK one of the hardest places for children to access harmful content and misogynistic influences online.
Yep.
I wonder, given the scale of the challenge that you've outlined, what further steps, what further decisive action you think may be required by this government to do that?
Okay, so I think that what is required by this government may well be legislative in lieu of the people who could do it tomorrow doing it. So the people who could do this tomorrow, it is perfectly possible for naked images, for example, to be blocked on a device. I have seen the devices. I have it exists. The technology exists. So I don't know why a tech company wouldn't want that to be completely and utterly standard on every single phone in our country. I don't know why tech companies wouldn't seek to ensure. I do know why. It makes loads of money. So all of the things that the government will have to take action on, which was the case with the Online Safety Act and the age gating of pornography, I don't know why the companies wouldn't want to have a child protection element to that themselves. So that what we will do, and what I seek to do, is work with those companies to do the thing that needs doing, push them to go further, which is certainly what Liz Kendall and I were doing when we met with them. But the government, as the Prime Minister has said very clearly, that where regulation and legislation needs to change, then that is what we will do.
Thank you. Ofcom published its guidance to the tech companies, I think, in recent months about this, and it was separated into foundational guidance that must be done under existing legislation, and a section that it called good practice. And to give an example of what was classed as good practice would be demonetising user-generated content which promotes misogynistic abuse and sexual violence. Is Ofcom currently operating with the severity that is required for the level of crisis?
I think Ofcom, to be fair to them, and they can answer for their own performances, but Ofcom are, in your example, doing the powers that we have given them in legislation. They do not have the power So largely, like we have had to, as a government, put in quite a lot into the Online Safety Act with regard to making priority offences of anything to do with adult women. So children, child abuses and terrorism offences are relatively well covered by the Online Safety Act. But for example, we had to make a priority offence of intimate image abuse, for example. So I think that in their codes of practice, Ofcom is living within the legislation that they have got. But do I always think that all regulators should do more and have more teeth? Always, as I often say to people, regulation is relied upon, and if you really rely on regulators to do all the work, then I invite you to go and drink the water from the Thames.
Thank you. And my final question, if I may, Chair, is just on the prevention side online, not about necessarily tech, but in terms of the misogynistic environments that we have a situation where some call the likes of Andrew Tate a role model. But people. We have algorithms that push that sort of content to young men and boys.
Absolutely.
What, in your view, should tech companies, and again, if tech companies fail, governments do to shape the online environment to reduce the amount of misogynistic influence?
Look, there is a huge amount of misogynistic content, and as the Home Office, we don't just worry about the misogynistic content, but also the Venn diagram of how that interacts with ultra-violent content. If we look at the Southport findings from the Southport inquiry, we have to take on board all of those incidences, which is, the consultation that is currently ongoing about what children should and shouldn't be able to access online, and the commitments to not need further 10-year-long primary legislation. I look around this committee and note that most of you weren't here for what was incredibly painful in getting the OSA over the line, and took a huge amount of effort and goodwill across party, I have to say, to work on it. But the regulating power that has been given to the Secretary of State to do that quickly, based on the consultation, it's not, I don't find it. I am the mother of two I keep saying this, but actually one of them's 21, so he's not a teenager anymore. I just can't quite give it up. But it's not. I don't find myself in a comfortable position of saying what people should and shouldn't look at, actually, especially when you're talking about young men finding their way in the world. But what is not safe for them, and what is definitely causing alarm in the data that I then see about the perpetration of violence against women and girls, whether that's child abuse or domestic abuse, or in the worst cases murder, then you do have to think what is inappropriate for children to be looking at. I don't find it particularly comfortable to say you should look at this and you shouldn't look at that, but having boys fed really, really misogynistic content is not something that we would allow on our normal televisions. That's not allowed on the telly, yet the telly my son takes to his room every night. I'd like it to just be like the telly. If we could just make it like the telly. Watch the snooker.
Thank you.
And you will know that, I go back to when I was doing your job. It was a girl I met who was a survivor, and I asked her what's the one thing that we should do, and she said stop people watching pornography. And I was determined to do it, and I tried to do it in the Digital Economy Act. We got the legislation passed, and it never got enacted, and we had to wait for online safety. So it really is tough to get this stuff done.
It really absolutely is, and you face an enormous backlash, but I think that now the public is in a different place even to then, actually, and I think that the lack of and it's very easy to blame parents, isn't it, and say that parents should be controlling what their children watch, and of course you have to take responsibility. Then my kids know way more about technology than me, but the truth is that, like, I wouldn't put my children in a car that hadn't been safely regulated, have the seat belts, and then I wouldn't just allow somebody who had, like, you know, wildly racist views to drive them around the corner. I would say, yeah, just jump in, kids. Yeah, like, they've got this crazy racist and he's going to drive you around in a car that has no seat belts or and it does feel a little bit like parents feel a little bit like that's where they've been left. Certainly, I can only speak for myself.
And likewise, we wouldn't let them play in the park unless there was fences round the playground and the bad guys couldn't get in and hurt them, but we don't mind them doing it online.
Yeah, what I want is for me to be able to feel that my children are safe playing out in the front.
Exactly.
Like, I don't want them to not play out in the front. I don't want them to be kept inside or kept away from the world. I want to feel like I've put in everything possible in place so that they can play out in the front garden. My children are often like, I wish you wouldn't use us like this as an example, because we're not 5. They can play out in the garden. They've both got jobs.
We're going to move on to some of the metrics. So Chris Murray.
Great, thank you. I just want to take us back to the metrics and how we're evaluating this. So you've already talked about standardising the definitions.
Yeah.
You've talked about the reliance on the crime survey and the usefulness and limitations of doing that, and some of the sort of key indicators that you use, like sexual harassment, domestic abuse, homicide, as you mentioned. I just wonder what you're doing to improve the police, specifically, the police's collection of data on VAWG.
I mean, if you obviously us signing up to all having the same sort of standards and the reporting mechanism is one thing that we are doing, but we are also in the department going through an enormous police reform piece of work, and part of that is around what police forces are, you know, what are the metrics that they are going to be monitored against, because actually one of the things that police have to report on, it's very, very rare that VAWG metrics are even ever included in the returns to the centre, so it hasn't been prioritised to date. But I don't know if you want to say any more about what they do. I mean, there's the specific on police recording. Obviously, I think we'll probably come on to it when we talk about the grooming gangs cases, but there are specifics about areas where the data is just awful and hasn't been collected, even when the frameworks were in place, and can be in place because some forces do it, some forces don't, for example. So as part of the policing reform, we will be looking at whether it's legislation as part of that, or specific guidance or changes to codes that mean things have to be recorded, because the data isn't great. Like, I don't know, like the ethnicity data in perpetrators is the example that often gets raised in that, but like I don't even know like the ethnicity or the migration status of the victims. Actually, that's a real problem as well in policy decision making.
Going to come on to that, but I think you want to come in.
Yeah, and I think just to add, obviously, the primary focus for us in engaging with policing on data has been getting to that common definition, because that does really underpin a lot of how we know we'll be able to improve the picture. I think the Minister's talked about some of the kind of technicalities around coding and individual officers recording individual crimes. I think the strategic thing I'd just add on top of that is all the work that we're doing through the National Centre to try and build awareness, improve training, raise understanding of the complexities of VAWG. We would hope to see all of that then translate through into both improved responses but also improved recording as well.
And what about the specific gaps in the current situation? So you already alluded to we've a lot of lack of knowledge of victims. We've just talked about online abuse, which we know is completely, I mean, we've talked about rapes as well, but online just isn't captured at all. Under 16s, a massive gap. I mean, what do you think? So two questions. Like, what are you doing to address those like massive gaps in the system, and how are you balancing the paradox at the heart of this, which is by focusing on the collection, you will drive up the instances of these rather than down when your target is to have them.
I don't. My target isn't a half-recorded crime.
Of course,
in this space, to be completely clear. I expect it to go up actually, and certainly in certain crime types anyway, certainly in adult sexual violence, I expect increases that I think that we're already seeing some of through the instigation of Operation Soteria, actually taking on cases that previously might not have been taken on. Because I would say sexual violence is a bit further ahead in its improvements in this, but there are a number of big and you do the balance they actually have to have here is wanting to make sure that we get the right data so that you can hold people accountable and make policy on the basis of that data in a local area, a national area, whatever. And making sure that you don't make it so onerous on the police doing the job that data collection ends the curiosity. When I was on Birmingham City Council, I made every single person who worked at Birmingham City Council ask a series of questions of people, sort of like routine inquiry, and I sat in a housing office and I watched the person in the little cubicle next to me, and the housing officer said, "Have you ever been a victim of domestic abuse?" And the woman said yes, and she said, "Have you ever been a victim of sexual violence?" And she was like, "Yes." And then she was like that, "Have you got any pets?" And I was like, oh God, follow up on the thing that the woman said. I was like, this is terrible, and it's my fault because I made them collect this data. So it's really working with the centre to look at what both policing, what we need to make sure that there is accountability, and it's things like the monitoring of, and one of the things that will form one of the headline, that one of the metrics within it is things like how many orders were given out. So stalking protection orders, some forces will have done 1,000 last year, some will have done 2. It's making sure that we know what we are looking for in the data and making sure that that isn't too onerous on policing. But there is gaps, no two ways about it. And the online one, I think, is probably the biggest one.
I can give you a little bit more detail of how we approach this for the strategy as well, because I think we really heard the feedback from your inquiry and from the NAO around having a really robust performance framework. I think what we were trying to do as well is just strike the balance. We had a choice really. We looked at the data sets that are available and the data collection points, but we could have either just said, okay, we'll just go with what we've got already, and we didn't want to do that. We actually wanted to push out into new and different areas. And so that's why I think you will see we've set out in the strategy some of the performance metrics are still under development, and that's probably for 2 reasons. So that is just in some areas it will be that we know there will be great data in the NHS. We need to work with our colleagues to understand how to extract that and pull that through into our reporting. So that won't necessarily be new data collection, it will be more kind of new being integrated to us. There are areas then, as the Minister, we've talked quite a bit about online harms, where we need to think about how we build really good prevalence measures and what that looks like. And just to specifically address your point about under 16, so obviously the crime survey doesn't survey people under the age of 16. We know that is a gap. We are determined to find a way to do it. I was talking to the ONS again just last week in terms of how we make that happen. That is work that is underway. It is not necessarily straightforward, but it is absolutely essential for us that we do that. And we're making good progress with the ONS in understanding what our routes might be to collect that data, because it is absolutely critical. And then I think alongside that, I've talked about kind of the outcome data, which will help us really understand whether we're driving the changes on prevalence that the Minister's talked about. But we, alongside that, for the strategy, have a really robust delivery set of metrics that we report into number 10. So, for example, that will be things like rollout of Reneem's law for the Home Office or rollout of depots. So that delivery reporting is happening alongside as well.
Okay, thank you. And you've said that the strategy has hundreds of interventions listed in
259.
250.
I'll name them all.
But and we've heard as well that the Cabinet Office and the Treasury have set up an evaluation task force that's going to be looking at all 250 of these interventions, seeing what works, what doesn't. So my question is, how will you decide if something isn't working and stopping doing it? And I don't just mean that it's not having the impact, but it might be too hard or too resource intensive. And so can you tell us what your thought process is on ending interventions that are in the strategy? And I wonder if even at this early stage, are there some you're seeing are just becoming too difficult to operationalise?
Not yet. I very much think that there will be, though, and I think that also that 259 doesn't stay at 259. It doesn't just fall back. There will be things that we come up with that are in the strategy as well. The overall work goes on regardless and it's the first step. It doesn't sit in aspect, and we will update. We've agreed to update Parliament on an annual basis on the strategy. So it's but you're absolutely right. I won't keep something going out of embarrassment, I suppose, but that like, you know, or like if I don't think something works, and actually in the space of prevention on young people, there's a huge amount that goes on in the world in the field. I often say to people, I've written 2 education programmes on domestic abuse and sexual exploitation for the Home Office in my career. So, but I don't know. I don't have any evidence that they worked long term. And so, in the first instance, with the bit of work we're doing on education and prevention, we're really going to sweat learning what actually works. So we will try some things that definitely won't work. We'll do no harm. I'll try and do no harm to anyone in the process.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to move on to bioenforced services, and then we want to cover grooming gangs and trafficking before the end. So I'm going to turn to Robbie Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Minister, I would just, staying with the VAWG strategy, concerns have been raised over the lack of focus on migrant and asylum-seeking women in the strategy.
Yeah.
So I'm just keen to understand, what assessment have you made of the impact of the changes to the immigration rules on migrant and asylum-seeking women at risk of VAWG?
So one of the big things that was campaigned for by bioenforced services and those who those who represent migrant women really specifically was the need for a firewall between immigration services and policing. And it was subject of a super complaint, in fact, which one of my constituents was part of it. Always good to go into a department that you've taken legal action against, so the firewall worked up with the sector is very much within the violence against women and girls strategy. So a commitment to that data never being passed over from police without the consent of the victim is like a fundamental part of ensuring that migrant victims feel that they can come forward. With regard to the immigration changes in the white paper specifically, and I know because I wrote this part into it, it specifically states that any new policy will take account of the needs of victims of certain crimes, including domestic abuse and violence against women and girls, in any changes that are made. And obviously our immigration system, as is today, has a different system for victims of domestic abuse as it does for others, notwithstanding that that's not always the easiest thing for people to use.
Yeah, and so there's been concerns raised. I've raised them to my own constituents in Keighley, and I know it may be similar in your own constituency.
Indeed.
And the BBC have also been reporting on it as well, where there's been false claiming by migrants to be victims of domestic abuse in order to stay in the country. Yep. And the numbers are quite staggering, really. So according to the BBC, up to the 12 months up to September last year, 5,596 migrants made applications for indefinite leave to remain as the victims of domestic abuse. And there is perceived to be a loophole within the system where false claims are being made. Mm-hmm. They are therefore then protected by the state. There is the element of challenge that would rightly be put to the person where the claim has been made against by the appropriate police force where that investigation takes place, but it then proves to be false. Mm-hmm. But that individual is then able to still, the person that's made the claim, the false claim, is then able to still proceed with their application and be protected effectively by the state and enabling that route citizenship to continue. Do you have any understanding of the level of scale of this issue. I've raised it in West Yorkshire. It happens in my constituency. I have multiple constituents come and talk to me about it.
Yeah, so obviously the BBC case was a case about my constituent, and it cites my interaction as a constituency MP with the Home Office on the matter. So your characterisation of it. So I have handled it with regard to scale from the point of view of the Home Office that you are talking about. I would say that it is definitely an issue. It is an issue that I have asked for work to be undertaken, and work is in train on this particular issue from the moment I had this job, because I have handled in my career hundreds of cases. It used to be called Sojourner when it first existed, which I think you meant to pronounce Sejourner, but we all called it the Sojourner Project in Birmingham, and then it went to be the Domestic Abuse Concession, and now it is the MVDAC. They are essentially the same thing, and I have to say, in all those years of this scheme, I did not see these cases in the manner in which I have seen them in the past 5 years, I would say. And I'm not talking as a Home Office Minister now, I'm talking as a constituency member of Parliament. But I also see in the field of domestic abuse, more broadly, the issue of claim and counterclaim becoming the game in town. So a woman comes forward, says she's been a victim of domestic abuse, man comes forward and says he's been also. So the claim and counterclaim, it's like perpetrators of domestic abuse all have like one massive WhatsApp group where they learn the current thing to do. So I have seen a growing number of these cases that you are referring to, and also raised the issues with the Home Office as you have done. However, I have seen thousands more of those cases be completely and utterly legitimate. And so the balance in this regard is to say that the evidence required in such circumstances, what nobody who has ever worked with a migrant victim who rightly might have been brought here to this country, has no connection with our laws, has no family to rely on, nobody would want to see that woman have to jump through many hoops to get away from being raped or held down until she was pregnant, which are cases that I have seen. Or think that she has the resource to do that. So you have to make it so that the evidential bar is a fair one, that stops the issue that you are talking about, but allows people with very little recourse to the law actually to be kept safe from terrible perpetrators of some of the worst crimes I have seen. So I understand that is the absolute tension that has to be worked on, and that is what the Home Office has been working to do. I don't think I can't say this many are fraudulent and versus this many. The vast majority are completely legitimate.
So the scale is obviously increasing because of the 5,000 and odd I referenced earlier. A good proportion of them, 1,424, according to the BBC, were actually cases raised by men, a rise in 66%.
Has been an increase in the use of it by men,
yeah,
no
compared
doubt.
to a rise by 47% by women in the same 2-year period. So it's definitely an increase in trend. So
Agreed.
in addition to raising the bar,
yeah.
What is the Home Office what is the Home Office doing about it, given the challenge
in order to raise the bar, you have to make it so, like, I don't want it to be that you have to have a conviction, for example. You'd be dead by the time you needed a conviction in these circumstances. But some of the evidential thresholds that have been used in the past, for example, which kind, like support organisations saying that you have been a victim and you have used their services, I think that needs to be incredibly tight on those organisations that are trusted, and also because, like, you could just set up I'm a DV advisor.com, you know what I mean, like, and we see that happening in other areas where there's a pot of money going around. Suddenly there's an organisation that's a specialist. So making sure that we have the evidential threshold completely right. But I like you say, I have seen these cases. I cannot, for example, say well, men have to be held to a higher standard than women, for example, because that would be illegal.
Can I just ask as well, in addition to, finally on this, what the government is doing to help those where a false claim has been made against. And I'll use an example. In my constituency, a false claim was made against the mother of a daughter that came over from Pakistan. The mother was a teacher at one of my schools. She then lost her job because of the false claim and accusation being made against her to do with domestic abuse, which never went anywhere because West Yorkshire Police dropped the case. But therefore, the impact on her credibility within the community, etc., was therefore substantially impacted.
Well, I mean, in cases of all false claims such as that, what I would certainly working and doing this work with my own police force is making sure that police are considerably better at if I were to be completely honest, what I see in my own force has been, quite rightly, a reaction to us all saying the police don't respond enough to domestic abuse, to then going to a position of not investigating the possibilities in, like I say, claim and counterclaim and false allegation. I am seeing more and more across the board, not just in an issue of immigration. So making sure that people understand that that is being used as a tactic in the field and forms part of training with regard to what is happening. It's usually the canary in the mine in these things is usually the family court, and we saw it coming. It's been there for some time. It is now breaching out, I would say, into the criminal law. But people who make false allegations should be held accountable as well. It is quite difficult, isn't it, to say that something is not founded in these cases means it's not true, because that would mean that the vast majority of rape in this country never happened. So there is a balance to be had. I'm absolutely sure your constituent is a completely upstanding. So it's not as easy as just saying do take these cases for certain, don't. There is a nuance that has to be. But personally, as somebody who's quite well trained, I personally think I could tell the difference.
So I'd like to move on to the rape gangs and the child sexual exploitation, if that's okay. Just following on from Baroness Casey's report, which came out in June last year, do you agree with all the recommendations that were within that report?
Do I agree with them?
Agree with the recommendations?
Yeah. I agree with them. Yes.
So the
government agrees with them.
One of those key recommendations, it will hopefully be no surprise that I'm going to reference it, is the data collection. And the mandation that was actually on page 151 and 152 of Baroness Casey's report, that all data must be retained by all organisations, police forces, local authorities, and any organisation with safeguarding responsibility. And Baroness Casey said that direction effectively had to be given to those organisations, which it wasn't. And we know that as a committee because of a Home Secretary wrote to the committee saying that was the case. So I would just like to understand why that wasn't issued as a direction, even though it was a recommendation provided by Baroness Casey.
The direction given by Baroness Casey is that records have to be retained, and at the announcement of the inquiry and its existence, look, for a start off, I just want to say on the record, to be clear, people shouldn't be destroying records at all, because it is the law that, for example, children's safeguarding records have to be kept until the child is 75. Police have all manner of record keeping. So is there another particular record keeping holder that you are concerned about that doesn't fit within those rules?
All I'm just wanting to get to the bottom of is it specifically says local authorities, police forces and other relevant agencies should, in the meantime, between June, when this report came out from Baroness Casey, to the point at which the National Inquiry set up, should be required not to destroy any relevant records.
They are required, that's absolutely correct.
But I'm just wondering, why did Baroness Casey feel strong enough to write this as a recommendation for a direction to be issued, but there was no direction that came out from government?
The direction is that Baroness Casey said that they were required to do that, and so they are required to do it. But I shall hand over to Luke.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say Ms Moore, you and other members of the committee will know well, as do we in the Home Office, because we've heard it directly from victims and survivors, the staggering lack of trust, for good reason, that victims and survivors have in state institutions in this space to respond to them and then to be held accountable. And that is exactly why the inquiry has been established and why we've established a national police operation alongside. As the Minister said, I mean, our judgment at the time was that given the extant legal obligations on organisations and public authorities to retain these records, both springing from existing codes of practice, regulation and legislation, and also from the fact that an inquiry had indeed been announced, our judgment was that the best time to write to relevant organisations to remind them of those legal obligations would be alongside the publication of the draft terms of reference.
Which was 6 months later after the publication of the Casey review. That was the first time where that came out from the Home Office anyway. It was a further 8 months later before MHCLG wrote to local authorities with that level of instruction. All I wanted to understand was, if you, as you have rightly identified, Mr Hughes, is that trust is a key issue here. Would the government not have been better to try and re-establish that trust by reassuring those victims and survivors that a direction should have gone out on the back of the Casey review, that no data should be destroyed in the meantime, as Baroness Casey asked for the government to do?
Because the Home Secretary's letter set out, our judgment was, though, as I say, those obligations existed. A letter before the draft terms of reference were published on the 9th of December wouldn't have been able to say anything about the scope of the inquiry, which organisations were in scope, what time period, what issues were to be examined. It would have only been able to restate what was already in the public domain, which was that an inquiry had been announced and indeed organisations already had obligations to retain records. So our judgment was that the right time to do it was through the Chair to the Cabinet Secretary on the 9th of December, which is what we did.
Do you think that some of the records have been... do you have evidence? I don't expect you to give it to me here,
given
but give it to them.
Again, I just simply come back to the point that it was a recommendation within Baroness Casey's report. It's a level of concern that I know is out there. I get correspondence from it as a constituency MP about the concern that could be happening. And given it was
the concern is real.
Just given that it was raised in a report, I simply just wanted to get to the bottom of that.
The concern is absolutely real, and as you, I'm sure, I have heard of people, whether malign or benign, people's records not being available in various different things. Do I think that if it was malign, the benignity sometimes comes from, for example, different local authority boundaries changing, and a children's home, for example, was under the jurisdiction of the MOJ, there was a lot of that during ICSA. That seems benign, but I'm not sure that any letter would stop malign disruption of. But what and certainly when I have spoken to the Chair, and I know that I think she's before your committee soon, when I have spoken to the Chair and other panel members, and in fact Louise Casey when she was undertaking her review, is that the absence, and I raised this very specific issue of the absence of material being raised with me by people variously over the years and more recently, is that that has to be fundamental in and explained as part of the inquiry. So if there is an obvious thing that is missing that should have been there, that tells a story just as much as the data being there, and some of that will be, you're right about trust, some of it will be completely and utterly benign, but where malignancy has happened, I expect the inquiry to look into that.
So can I just, there's a few other points I'd just like to ask, just to do with local areas that are going to be included within the inquiry. The government was confident to announce that Oldham would be included as part of an inquiry way back in January of 25, when the previous Home Secretary said it would be included as part of the local inquiries. I'm curious as to why Bradford has not been announced so far, given that it was referenced within ICSA, given that it was referenced within Baroness Casey's audit itself, of which she determined that Bradford is a key area of concern, and given that Operation Dales Way has been existing across the Bradford district since 2014, why the government, to date, 18 months after announcing Oldham, doesn't feel confident enough to announce that the Bradford district should be included, even when Baroness Casey states in her recommendations local investigations should commence sooner in areas where the Independent Commission and the Home Office agree that sufficient evidence already exists. What more evidence does the government need to announce that Bradford district and Keighley must be included?
So it is an independent inquiry. Now, the reason for the Oldham decision was because that the Home Office was already down quite a long way down the journey of commissioning the independent inquiry into Oldham, and we want to talk about a problem of a lack of trust in this situation. To then say, well, Oldham might not get it when we were down the line, that felt cruel, if I'm perfectly honest, actually. But that it is now for the inquiry to decide and publish the criteria used to select the local areas of investigation. I personally, I can't say this enough, think that they should look into Bradford. I think they should look into Birmingham, and I think that they should, but it's not, what I think is completely and utterly academic, because it is an independent inquiry that has to lay out the publication of the criteria and select the local areas from that. It is my experience of working in the field between both my city and yours that there is problems in both. I don't deny that, but I could say that evidence for a lot of places as well.
Just on funding, £65 million has been allocated to it. There's been approximately a narrative of 50 towns, more than 50 towns could warrant having an inquiry. I've mentioned Bradford, you've already referenced Birmingham. 65 million doesn't seem like a lot of money. For the 50 towns that have been referenced, that's 1.3 million for each town. Why is it being allocated just £65 million? And on time frame, realistically, do you think it's achievable to get the results delivered in 3 years, given that we're not going to hear about which local areas are going to be focusing on until at least end of July this year, and the announcement for the independent inquiry terms of reference was nearly a couple of months ago.
So one of Baroness Casey's recommendations, I think it was 12, was that it had to be properly resourced, and I have to say I had many conversations with her throughout the process of this, and I have to say the resourcing of it was not one that she was pleased. It was one that she was pleased with. It was not one that she came back to me with concern, and that £65 million is made up of cross-government contributions to ensure that this happens, and I think that is quite important as well. Do I think it is enough, and that 3 years, that is the way that Louise Casey designed the system, and yes, I do think it is enough, and I do think that they will do it within that time. I have to say I have been absolutely bowled over at the timeliness, for example, of the Southport inquiry, and also when you look at I think it was like you said 1.3 billion per town, for example. Well, even if that were the case, which is a totally rudimentary multiplication of a number of towns, 50 was the number that you used. Well, actually, when the inquiry, the initial inquiry into Rotherham was done for a lot less than that. So just to be clear, but it is for them to decide. Also, should they not be able to do it within that amount of money, they will make that clear quite quickly. Okay. Somebody who has a number of different inquiries that sits under me, people are not shy of saying that.
And I just want a final question, just to do with the positioning of the whole of the government on this issue. Given it's the biggest national scandal, I think, that's hit this country for a long time, was it ever considered by government to reposition this out of being controlled effectively by the Home Office into the Cabinet Office? And the reason I ask that is because it's local authorities that are involved, it's all safeguarding organisations, it's care homes, of course it's police forces. When the independent inquiry was set up to the infected blood inquiry, it initially was controlled by the health department. But then one of the key recommendations was to reposition it at the centre of government so that it had full reassurance that all arms of government and their statutory agencies could be properly explored. So what reassurance can you provide me that even though this is controlled by the Home Office, that the inquiry will go into all areas that don't necessarily just sit under the Home Office's jurisdiction?
Oh gosh, no, absolutely not. But I mean, like I already talked about the Southport inquiry, where the vast majority were absolutely nothing to do with the Home Office. ICSA, of the 20 ICSA recommendations, 3 are for the Home Office, has sat under the Home Office's auspices. So that is Angelini, similarly, more so, because it is really specifically about policing, but also has recommendations for DBT and others. So it's not, I mean, I suppose the assurance I would want to give in that regard isn't just that it will look into other things, and actually the panel was really selected because of a variety of experience, both local authority, health and policing, was selected for that exact reason that you are pointing out. But what I would want to give more of an assurance on, I suppose, and the thing that would that I want to, is that where the Home Office has a case to answer in the inquiry, or any government department or government institution, arm's length body, has a case to answer in the inquiry about how it might have malignly or benignly taken part in this problem being a national scandal as you describe it, that will absolutely be the case, just as the COVID inquiry has had to hold the health service to account and the Treasury and others. That will absolutely be the case in this. But there has not been any particular representations or recommendations to move it to the Cabinet Office by them or us or anyone that I can, apart from till this very moment.
And having previously led cross-government inquiries policy in the Cabinet Office and given evidence to House of Lords Committee on exactly that sort of question, there are real benefits to having a Home Department with a minister absolutely invested in the issue as the sponsoring minister in terms of the long-term response. So, but fundamentally, the inquiry has to deliver on its terms of reference, which are set out. That is established under the Inquiries Act. There's no way that it being sponsored administratively by the Home Office is going to constrain that in any way.
All right.
Thank you. I want to go and think about the thousands of young women and girls and the confidence that they need to have to give evidence to the inquiry. I'm concerned that because of the institutionalised nature of the turning of the blind eye by all elements of the state, how can they have the confidence that they will be believed and trusted when they come forward?
I mean, look, it's I can only imbue the confidence in them through changed action. Like that's not something that is going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. In building the terms of reference, a large number of different victims groups were worked with by the chair, and they, as part of the beginning of the inquiry, and in tandem we have been undertaking this work with the policing side of this Operation Beaconport to ensure that there are proper victims charters. So if you think about Beaconport, when we're looking through thousands of old cases, like there is and I spoke to victims myself who were like, well, I don't just want the police rocking up and saying, you know, I'm now 45, I've got 2 kids and I'm moved on with my life. I don't want you to now say, we're opening up your case. Like there has got to be a very sensitive handling of this from the victim's perspective. The inquiry, when they come and speak to you, will talk about what their plans are for that, but that was a fundamental part of the commissioning of the inquiry, that there has to be a victim and survivors charter, and working alongside the NCA with regard to the policing element of that. It's been weeks and weeks of work on my part and others and specialists to try and make sure that we get that exactly right. And a fundamental part of what gets funded through those things will be the support for victims going through it. But there's, I believe you. That I stand here and I say that I believe you. I believe bad things happened to you. I think that in any inquiry there's an amount of rigour that has to be put to evidence that I don't want anyone to ever perceive that is because of disbelief. The inquiry comes from the perspective of believing the girls and believing there was a failure. Wouldn't exist otherwise, would it? So believing that, but these are fine words. They mean nothing until things change to any of these people.
Just add briefly that, I mean, it's a sad but obvious fact that these statutory inquiries often are established in these sorts of circumstances where victims and survivors have an extremely low base of confidence and trust. And we've seen in cases like the Infected Blood inquiry or the Grenfell Tower inquiry, where those inquiries have been able to, over time, build that trust and confidence with the affected communities. And I know the chair and panel are absolutely seized of that, as they've demonstrated in the past few months.
Yeah, the blood inquiry's feelings towards the chair, from a constituency perspective of my own constituents, was remarkable, actually. And I'm sure that's not always the case, and there isn't one sort of victim. And so, and if ICSA taught us anything, it is varying feelings towards the inquiry, but like there is no one perfect system, but we have to try and do the very best.
Very quickly, Ben Maguire.
Just very quickly following up on Joe White's point, I had quite a startling meeting recently with a representative from a charity. Obviously won't go into details to protect their anonymity, but she'd been subjected to quite severe psychological, physical, domestic abuse, and it conspired that actually the same perpetrator had done very similar to two other victims who hadn't decided to go to the police because they didn't have the confidence they'd be listened to or believed, to your point earlier, Minister. And then she subsequently discovered another victim who had brought her case all the way to court, only to be told by the CPS the night before the hearing date that it couldn't go ahead. There wasn't sufficient evidence, despite 14 witness statements, including from one of the other victims. And then she herself experienced almost the identical thing happening, albeit her case was postponed because there weren't judges available, I think, to have the case heard. So just to the point about trust and confidence in the system.
I mean, why would you have any?
What can your department do to work with the Justice Department on that?
Like, there is a fundamental failure. I mean, look, when I was working in the field in the beginning, and actually, if you look at, especially if you're talking about grooming gang cases, you are talking about multi-lawyer, multi-perpetrator, multi-victim. The time that it takes, and look, this is another thing that I think that actually, if we all truly want to really, really win back trust with the victims, is we have to tell the truth. We have to stop pretending that there is a simple overnight solution to this. It can take even before the backlogs. And I could sit and tell you about how in the strategy and the manifesto there's all things about specialist rape courts, that recognising the need for specialist domestic abuse courts, or whatever it is, that we're putting advocacy into rape victims so that they've got lawyers themselves, all of those things to try and make the system seem a bit trusting. But the reality is that especially in these complex multi-perpetrator, victim cases, where a victim will have to be, cross-examined often not by one lawyer, but by multiple lawyers. I can't say how proud it makes me of the people who go through with it, but no way judgmental of anyone who might not want to, because that's a big ask. They take years, even before all the delays. So yes, I will do everything that I possibly can to make it so, because what most victims will tell you, whether it's grooming gangs, domestic abuse, they will say that the system that I went into was worse than the abuse that I suffered. Like the fact that they tried to take my children away, the fact that they criminalised me, the fact that, like, whatever it is, whatever your poison is that when you're a kid, you believe if you go to a police officer, that the police officer will help you, and that your teacher will help you. And the sense of aloneness and abuse when that foundation is taken away from you, when you've already suffered a harm, is the thing that like, if the strategy was to try and do anything, it is like, wherever you stand up, make that the person who stands in front of you better. It's got to make the person who hears it, whether it's your GP, your doctor, your youth coach, whatever it is, the person you talk to online, whatever it is, it needs to be better. And only then, it's going to take, I mean, like, I could lie and say, like, I won't still be in Parliament by the time we achieve this. But that's the reality. It's going to take a long time, and we should stop pretending otherwise.
You need to be believed, and you need to be listened to, and you need to have people who are on your side and trusting you.
That's it. Advocacy of a trusted adult, especially with children. It doesn't matter who that is.
We need to stop box ticking and saying it's okay, we've ticked every box like you talked about earlier,
just
and
shocking.
Instead listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
We've got a few more questions on human trafficking, if you're okay with that.
You can go for it quickly. Yeah.
Chris Murray.
I don't know if you... I didn't ask. Are you all right? Are you all right? Yeah. People forget that they also have diaries, and I'm not just the centre of the universe.
Thank you. And just to put on record my declaration that I'm a trustee of the Human Trafficking Foundation. So yeah, human trafficking. So the previous Home Secretary came before us over a year ago and said the national referral mechanism, which is the way that we protect victims of trafficking in this country, she said that had become a bit stuck. So what have you been doing over the last year and a half to improve and reform the national referral mechanism?
How long is it taking at the moment?
Okay, so I don't actually have the direct details about it, but let me tell you, it is at the lowest it's been in a long time. It currently is, I think we'd reached a point where it's 565 days on average, and I apologise, I'm sure maybe somebody will hand me the exact data, but there has been, it is at a 20-month low in the time that it is currently taking. That said, that is not because of any reforms to the national referral mechanism. That is entirely because resource was put into it and prioritised. So I think we prioritised having extra people into the single competent authority. And the other, it's amazing that it's called the Single Competent Authority, and it is not the single authority. I shall leave the rest to. There is also another authority that does it. So we put extra resource into that, which has brought the backlog down dramatically. However, what we have undertaken is a consultation about the access points within so identification of victims of modern slavery, ergo the national referral mechanism as it is today, but a little bit more broadly about what needs reforming in that space, because I think we would all agree that was absolutely trailblazing, and I go to countries around the world. I was in Romania recently because we do quite a lot of trafficking bilateral work that we also fund with their governments jointly. And I was there recently, and still, like, the national referral mechanism, which we all moan about, is still seen as being like an absolute gold standard of identification and monitoring of victims of modern slavery. The system as it is today, and it includes the grooming gang victims in this, is not the one it was designed for. So when I was first working in the field, you were talking around sort of 4,000 cases a year, largely of people trafficked outside of the country into our country. You are not talking about that, like 25% of the last full year's data, and consistently for many years the data has shown that British children are a huge portion of the data, and so the system for identifying people well, whether it's within the sort of immigration system, children's services system, adult services system, needs some work, and so that work is ongoing based on the consultation and will be forthcoming soon.
Any idea when?
I mean, well, the consultation was complete and the work is being done to analyse that, but obviously legislative vehicles. I don't wish to get ahead of the King's speech, but
Please feel free to go with the committee.
I'm looking forward to all the cap doffing and things, the weird, like people with a pool cue and things that happens in this place around prorogation. I'm sure it's not a pool cue. Whether it's legislative change or quite a lot of it can be done in other changes, but some of it is some modern slavery changes, and that has been pushed for by very eminent people, will need some legislative change. So time frames on exactly when that will happen, I can't say at the moment. But look, releasing the work on what we will do with the national referral mechanism by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. And just 2 follow-up questions on specifics, please. So, I mean, we were just talking about for system failure for victims, a trusted adult is a really important mechanism. Yep. And you do commit to a contract for child trafficking guardians. I've seen firsthand the massive impact that guardians can have. So, is that contract out for tender? What's the status of it?
Yeah, I never know what I'm allowed to say because of commercial. The amount of conversations I am in as a minister where commercial gets said to me, I find infuriating. So the plan is to, and we have committed that the government will expand the ICTIG, which is the name of it, the Independent Child Trafficking Guardians. I don't like that name as well. I really feel like we need like a marketing agency to work on the things that we call things.
It was something that the House of Lords insisted on in 2015.
Yeah, it's just like ICTIG. It doesn't sound that friendly.
It was advocates. So we got guardians later.
So that it will be rolled out, and the adult modern slavery contract is in the process of being redone at the moment and has been at market participation, and I think that the same is true of the ICTIGs, but the plan is to roll it out across the country because, like you say, and not just that, and I know that you have been an advocate as well of the devolved decision making.
That's going to be my next question. So you have committed to rolling that out.
Yes, the devolved decision making has shown, like if there has been any reform to the NRM that has definitely worked and been tested now, it is devolved decision making with regard to children being devolved into local authority areas, and the areas I went to see it in Warwick myself, which is my nearest authority that was doing it. It's speeding up the decisions. There's less liable for appeal on decisions, so it's a better system, and I think it's rolling out to another. There's some up in Scotland, definitely. It's rolling out to a further 10 authorities. But yes, the plan very much would be it's a system that is better. Not necessarily cheaper, but no more expensive. But it's definitely a better system.
Okay, so just final quick. The goal is for that to be nationwide. Mm-hmm. This is about protecting child victims of trafficking. Mm-hmm. Why the delay in not making it nationwide now?
I think it's just simply a matter of just making sure that as it gets rolled out, that the evaluation of the different sorts of areas, because like I say, Warwick was done, that is completely different to doing it, for example, in Birmingham and the West Midlands. Just making sure that we have like you say, we're dealing with children, that we have that completely right. But there is, like I say, there's no financial benefit and or barrier to doing it. So it's not that it is. It's nothing to do with the idea of cost or anything. It's just making sure that those things are done properly, so that the system doesn't fall over or break down at a certain point.
I mean, it's been put to me that the NRM doesn't work brilliantly for UK nationals because they don't access the services in the way. If they'd not gone through the NRM and they'd gone through other pathways, they'd be accessing different services on housing, etc., etc. They just don't get to the NRM. The NRM really is it's
just become. I agree. I totally agree with you, and especially when I think about grooming gang cases that I have sought to take through the NRM. Usually, children who were groomed into adulthood, now adult victims of modern slavery, but British. Especially if you're not a child.
Exactly.
If you're not a child and you have that pathway, the difference in what is available to you, there is a fundamental imbalance between if you're there from a different country or if you have access to public funds, which British people all do, it's like get on your housing waiting list, like sort of thing, and it's just like that doesn't seem that. I totally agree with you. I'm not willing to take them out of it. I don't think when I think about what best needs to be done until the same exact robust system for, and actually if you look across all accommodation or advocacy support, like the real need, complex needs, so go to a women's refuge would be one of the arguments, I think, in that circumstance. But if you've been, you're enslaved and you've got substance misuse issues, you've got criminal record as a part of it, actually the safeguarding would say you can't stay in a women's refuge. So complex needs environments are the solution, I think, in this space. Until such a time as there's enough of that exists, I can't take them out of that particular system.
Absolutely.
But sorry, very quickly on that final point, because obviously the NRM doesn't just look at women and doesn't just look at sexual exploitation, it looks at all kinds of exploitation. And obviously the Fair Work Agency, which is now operational, but it's now outside the Home Office's control. Purview. So what work are you doing to ensure the Fair Work Agency, which has a lot of really important things to do beyond this?
I'm meeting with the Minister who will be leading on the Fair Work Agency tomorrow. So the Gangmasters part of the Home Office that was sat under my purview, which becomes part of the Fair Work Agency. So I have been working with the Gangmasters, with the Fair Work Agency, with the ministers involved and I will keep my hand in, even though it will no longer be my responsibility to make sure that both the Gangmasters bit of it is the bit that has the actual enforcement powers, the enforcement arm of it, and making sure that isn't lost to just like people who don't pay people the minimum wage. So it's a very real risk that we have been alive to as those two bodies go into one, and making sure that actually the enforcement part of it on poor working practices. And actually, when you say like sexual exploitation, when I worked in the field, it was the vast majority of modern slavery cases. Over the vast majority of people within the system were women, and the vast majority of the type, it was either domestic or sexual, with sexual outstripping almost everything else. That is not what the data says now. The majority are men, and actually labour and or county lines style abuse is the majority.
As you know, the APPG are looking closely at it with Baroness Brady. Don't worry.
Baroness, don't worry. That in Birmingham City, she's on it, or West Ham or whatever it is now.
One final point. And it goes back to the thing we were talking about the use of the Modern Slavery Act. It worries me that unless a victim has gone through the NRM, law enforcement doesn't even consider the Modern Slavery Act as the offences. And if I look at something high profile, like the Al Fayed cases, which admittedly some of them will predate the BMSA, but actually they are classically fit within the description of exploitation that the Modern Slavery Act sets out.
I absolutely agree with you, and also in that as well, like there is a sort of idea of what a victim of modern slavery looks like, and sort of like a well-to-do woman in that case. The idea that a police officer sits in front of that woman and says, I'm going to put this woman through the NRM, it just seems quite unlikely to me. And it is certainly one of the things that the Al Fayed victims have raised with me.
Have to say,
have
on
raised
both cases, they are definitely there. I need to wrap this up because I know the Minister needs to leave. We could spend all day. But I want to thank Minister and officials for coming and giving your time. Apologies for keeping you here a few minutes later, but thank you so much for your evidence today, and I will draw this to a close with order.